We all seek justice, but do we only want justice that serves us? Hello, I'm Brian Patrick. Welcome to Crossing the Goal, where we tackle the tough issues men think about but seldom talk about. Justice, giving what is due, is our topic this time on Crossing the Goal. As we kick off our show on justice, let's meet the Crossing the Goal team. Peter Herbeck is an author and speaker who directs international mission teams around the world. Curtis Martin wrote Boys to Men. He founded Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. And our coach, Danny Abramowitz, a well-known speaker and a former NFL player and coach. He wrote The Spiritual Workout of a Former Saint. Gentlemen, let's start out with Curtis this time.
Great. Our topic today, Brian, is justice. And this is an exciting topic, one that the world needs to hear. Yeah. We kind of begin with the golden rule that people inside and out of Christianity know, but to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What's great about justice is that probably more than any other virtue, we are hardwired to be able to be just people. From the time that we're very, very young, we have a sense of justice. It's an immature one, but we've all seen little children cry out, mine, or not fair. The virtue of justice takes that sense of justice and turns it from inside to out. So instead of crying out, mine, I cry out, yours.
Right. When I think of justice, two things come to mind is, do we give the person the benefit of the doubt, or are we quick to judge that person? Like the scripture says, do I look at the speck in their eye or the plank in my eye? Right. Or another thing, do we serve others, or are we the person that thinks every man for themselves?
I'm deeply impressed as we've been talking about the virtues, reflecting on the life of the Lord himself, and how much what the Lord did was to redirect our instinctive gaze, which is toward ourself. What about me, as you were saying? What about justice being done for me? So much so, and our society is loaded with this kind of orientation toward me and myself and my group and everybody getting recognized and my rights recognized, that it's easy for us to lose sight of the other. And Jesus' whole coming, his whole radical turn was the recognition of the other. There was, the Good Samaritan. How many religious people walked by him totally unaware, and the justice Jesus did, and we even went beyond in loving him and serving him. But the fundamental call that the Lord gave us was lose yourself, which is that dynamic in me that's always worried about myself and my rights, and you're going to gain the very thing that you're worried about. You're going to get what you want if you just believe me and follow me.
And the just man goes about setting things right. What is owed to other people? And so you see somebody who has less than they should, the just man goes about setting it right. Imagine a world where people were doing that instead of saying, no, this is mine, I earned this. Right. Okay, you did, but now that you've got more than you need, share.
Right. Yeah. And think about ourselves. Don't we have a lot of respect for people that serve others? And plus ourselves, when we serve others, I don't know about you guys, I feel so much better when I do. Yeah. And I have so much respect for a person that serves others.
And a just man or just woman is able to bring a certain kind of peace and order to every situation that they're in. Because they're looking outside themselves again, and they're not serving themselves first, but they're looking at what my neighbor needs, who my neighbor is, the dignity of my neighbor, and then responding to that dignity in the right way.
And not be thinking so much about self.
Right.
You get so self-centered sometimes.
Sure, and as it is with all of the other virtues, when we live the virtue, we were actually made to live the virtues, and so we're more at home within our own flesh because we are the men we're supposed to be, and all of a sudden we're at peace. We can clamor around and we work so hard to earn the money, and at the same time we're so stressed about it, and when we live a generosity and then trust God, who's never outdone in generosity, and all of a sudden we're at peace.
Yeah. Danny, I was thinking about a football example before about justice. When you played in your day, guys would score touchdowns, they'd drop the football, they'd thank their lineman or something like that and move on. Now, somebody scores a touchdown, it's all me. Everything is directed to me. And in the old days, it just seemed like there was more of a team concept. Right. It's us together, as opposed to everything being about me. Everybody look at me, me,
Now, I tried to do one of those flips, it didn't work. I landed on my head. That's what happened to me now. I'm half goofy.
That explains a lot of things.
But you're right. Yeah. I mean, everything seems to be me, look at me, even myself. I get so disgusted with myself times when I look at myself all the time. Hey, don't look at myself. Look at others, man.
The funny thing is that look at others is the key, because it's so much more of a blessing to be cared for by others. We were made for that. God actually wants us to have glory. He wants to share His glory with us. So we don't need to worry about drawing it down on ourselves.
Right.
God's going to take care of that. He will take care of us.
I think we need a game plan for justice. And Curtis and Peter are going to have it for us, Coach, when we come back here on Crossing the Goal. First, this quick timeout.
Welcome back. We're talking about justice. Curtis, tell us, what is justice?
Justice is the virtue, it's the skill or habit that we have by which we go about through life, giving to others what is due to them. It's what sets things right in the world. Original sin broke everything. God has called us to set things right. And if we begin with the others that we owe, a lot of times people want to start with other people, and it's very, very important to care for those who are sick, who are suffering, and who are poor and hungry. But really, if you think about it, the person or persons that we owe the greatest debt to is the Blessed Trinity. Yeah. We owe our entire existence to God, and so there's a debt to justice that Jesus actually talks about in Matthew 22. The Pharisees come to him and say, is it right that we should pay taxes? And they're trying to trap him, you know, and so they hand him a coin because he asked for it, and he begins to talk to them. In fact, well, you wrote a book on this. Yeah. Why don't you break that open for us?
Yeah, and then Jesus says to them, you know, they say, should we pay taxes or not? They're trying to get him to stumble like they always did. And he says, okay, whose image is on the coin? And they said, well, it's Caesar's. And he says, well, then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what belongs to God. In that short little line, you know, teaching and wisdom, Jesus reveals so much about how he understood reality and what he's trying to bring us into. He says, okay, the coin bears the image of Caesar's. What image do you bear is the fundamental question. That's the challenge that Jesus is giving to us. And he's saying, you belong to the Lord. You're born with his image and likeness, created with his image and likeness, so you owe him something. Just like the coin belongs to Caesar, you belong to God.
And at first, it looks at surface level as though it's just a beautiful reverse of a trap, because they're trying to get him, you know, saying, well, if he says that we shouldn't pay taxes, we'll go report him to the Romans. Yeah. And if he says you should pay taxes, we'll report him to the Jews. And it's a great trap. Yeah. And he walks right through it and says, the issue's not who you give the coin to. I want you to give yourself to me. Yeah. That's justice.
And the first act of justice is to give God what? How do you do justice to God?
We give him adoration. We give him thanks, to be able to worship him and to be acknowledging him. A lot of people, I think, today, we want to be just. We want to think of ourselves as just people. And I meet a lot of people on a college campus and in my travels who will have this sense, you know, I'm a pretty good person. And by that, they mean they do some good things. You know, I go camping and I try to leave the campsite better than I found it. Good thing to do. I don't kick my dog. Good thing to do. But you ask him and you say, all right, well, God just gave us 10 principles. In fact, you narrowed them down in Jesus' time to 2, love God and love your neighbor. How you doing on number 1? Not really doing it. Well, if God gave you 2 rules and you're not even trying to fulfill 1, you're not that just a person.
Yeah. And the rules, I mean, sometimes people can relate to the commandments just as rules, but what it is the commandments bring us into the reality of how the universe works. Relationship begins with God, and he draws us into relationship, and he reveals to us that relationship and communion and order can happen only when we're doing justice to one another.
And he's the one who said it right, because justice and mercy meet on the cross. Yeah. At the crucifixion, you have Christ rendering what seems to be an almost unfixable problem. We have a debt of justice to God. He made us, called us into obedience, and through original sin and all of our own individual sins, we broke fellowship with the God. There's no way on our own we can ever repay that. Our debt of justice, we're told, that the punishment for sin is death. Well, I don't know about you, but I only got one life. Right. So if I die, I'm done. But Jesus comes and takes on our flesh, and he can give his life and take it back again because he's God. So he renders that debt of justice, but he also does something else. God still looks at us, even though we've sinned, and said, I made them for eternal life. I made them to be with me. And so from the cross, Jesus also looks out and says, forgive them, Father. They don't know what they're doing. And he gives us another debt of justice, not one that's strictly owed, but one which looks in and says, you know what, you were made for this. Can I help you become what you're supposed to be?
And Calvary is the center of revelation about truth, about the truth about who we are, and it reveals the justice of God. And there's Jesus hanging on the cross, and he's talking to you and I. And he's saying, this is how you do justice to God. You obey him no matter what the cost. And obeying him will lead to life. And that's why he's calling it to us, not because God's up there and he's looking for this constant attention and he wants you to follow all the rules. He wants you to live in communion with him, which is what we celebrate at Eucharist. I mean, it may feel a little like I'm stretching it far, but one of the reasons I believe the Lord gave us communion, which is Calvary represented to us, is that every week the communion, the people of God come together, and that truth about how to do justice to God and how to do justice to one another is revealed to us. We literally consume the Lord, the power and the life of the Lord to lead us to a transformed way of living.
No, every time we walk to Mass, we walk to Calvary. We walk through the suffering and the death, his terrible, tragic death on the cross, but also to the empty tomb, because the communion we have is with the crucified and risen Lord, and to be able to see that this stamp of approval by the Father, that when Jesus is raised from the dead, 2,000 years of Christian history can numb us to the reality. People don't do that. Dead people die. That's it. Yeah. Only once in the history of the world did a man rise from the dead, never to die again. That's absolutely breathtaking. It's the heart of the Christian faith, and God is saying, if you trust me, I will bring you out of this world and into a world that will never end. And you're no fool to give up what you can't keep, to gain what you can't lose.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And Jesus essentially has on the cross is he's reordered reality, the reality of a fallen, broken world, that in that fall leads me to focus on myself, my own fulfillment, justice being done for me, and a blindness to my neighbor. And instead what he's done is he's opened up, he's made it possible by changing our hearts. He's opened us up to be able to do justice, to be able to love one another. Great job, Curtis. Brian?
Thanks, Peter. Coach, thank God mercy mixes with justice. We're going to mix it up on that topic down in the pit for the Red Zone next.
Well, let's go drive for a score down there, huh?
The Red Zone's next, here on Crossing the Goal. You're watching Crossing the Goal, and we let these guys cut loose here in the Red Zone. And let's start out a discussion about lying with a former saint who would certainly never lie.
Never lie. Guys, what I like to really get started with here
Yeah.
in the Red Zone is this whole idea of the manipulation and lying that goes on in the business world, business ethics sort of thing. And what I come to mind right off the bat is the Enron WorldCom deal, where they manipulated and just lied, and how so many innocent people just got affected. Because people, the stockholders, they tell me a lot of those were like teachers unions and things of this nature, and they weren't satisfied with this tremendous profit they were already making. They wanted more profit. There's nothing wrong with profit, but they wanted more, but at the state of lying and manipulating. I see that as one of the biggest problems.
Truth-telling is a sub-virtue of justice. You can see why. Because you and I were created by God, created with a mind and a reason. Why do we have it? Why did God give it to us? Because he wants us to know the truth about him, about us, about why we're here, about where we're going, and to live in the truth. In fact, you don't get fulfilled as a person. You don't come into the freedom, the life, the joy, and the destiny you're made for unless you live in the truth. And so to purposely deny someone who was made for truth, to deny the truth to them, is a grave sin in God's mind. Because why? Because I'm manipulating that person for my gain. I'm going to use you. I'm going to fail to tell you the truth so that I can gain something by lying to you.
And we think, lying's wrong because it hurts our feelings, and it does. But that's not why it's wrong. But we have to realize, to live in relationship, you have to live in the truth. Because I did this when I was an adolescent and I was running away from the faith. In order to cover up my sins, I would just lie to my parents about what I was doing. And what I didn't realize is I was killing the relationship with my parents in addition to the relationship with God. And all of a sudden I found myself, years later, alone, very alone. Not knowing God, not knowing my parents, or even many of my friends. In fact, I didn't even know myself anymore because I had failed to live in the truth that I was made for.
I don't know about you guys. When I try to lie to them, my ears would turn red and all that. But not only the lying and manipulation.
Like now?
Right. Yeah, lying like a rug. But the idea, even in sports, as innocent as sports is, the steroid thing and some of the cheating that goes on, it's very disheartening. And it knocks the stool out from underneath the young people who have so much confidence in all. I'm not saying that all do it, but it doesn't take much. You know, it's a little bit, and then a little bit more, then a little bit more, and it gets out of control.
Last night, kind of the journey of your own life and the drinking, how you kind of, the whole alcoholism thing in your life, how you ended up living a lie.
I lived my own lie. I lied so good that I believed it myself after a while. I mean,
it's pathetic and sad, but it does sound funny.
Being Polish is not hard.
And that spreads throughout the family too, doesn't it?
It affects the family. But you know when I finally recognized it? One morning, guys, I went in to shave. And this had been bothering me for years. It's not like it just came to me or what didn't bother me all along. It did. Because I knew I was lying. I knew I was doing these things. But I really never faced up to it. And that morning I went to shave, and I looked in the mirror, and I said, I hate this guy. That I lost all hope. You're a liar, Danny. I looked down into my soul, and it was dark. And I knew that I had really let myself, my family, everything down.
That darkness is precisely the darkness that Christ wants to shine his light into. We're all, to a greater or lesser degree, living the same story because sin wounds us all, and then we react to it. And there's really only two ways. You either play the game and go down the slope and begin to drift into greater and greater darkness, or you turn to the light and say, forgive me, I need your mercy. Can you heal me? And those are really the fork in the road that we meet at every moment in our lives because Christ never gives up on us. He's like that father in the prodigal son who's pacing, waiting for his son to repent and come back so he can embrace him.
You know, it's in a gazillion ways it seems like we give in to lies in our life, we believe lies, we tell lies, we do all kinds. Even I was just thinking of this whole thing that's in the news over the last years of fetal stem cell research, you know. I mean, what is that fetus other than a human being, right? What is it? And what we try to do, because we know what we want, the end is we want to use part of that child for our own purposes and for the good that we all want to find in it. So what we have to do is you have to blur the reality of what is that person. Well, it's not really a person.
It's not real,
no, it's not. Well, then we go back to, we talked about a few weeks ago about prudence. You know, prudence, the virtuous man doesn't come and say, okay, I know what I want in the end, so I'm going to make a lot of noise and come and I'm going to put a different reality upon it. I'm going to call it something other than what it is precisely so I can manipulate it and use it for my purposes. The prudent person says, wait a minute, what is it? In truth, I want to know what it is.
Classic statement of the ends don't justify the means. So just because you think what you're trying to do is good, help people, doesn't mean you can do bad things. It's never right to do what's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, a guy told me one time, and I never forgot this. He says, do right even when it seems right to do wrong. He said, no matter what, you know, just to do the right thing. We know it is. There's something innate in us that wants the truth.
Yeah.
But we're
made for the truth.
Yeah,
we are made
mask
for the truth.
it. Don't you think we mask it?
Well,
But it's hard, isn't it hard? I mean, to tell the truth sometimes is just brutal.
Absolutely.
And you just sit back and say the price to tell the truth is going to crush me. It's going to kill this relationship. It's going to blow this business deal, whatever it might be. I mean, it's amazing to have the power to tell the truth when it's not convenient.
Know what? I'm not going to stop lying. I mean, I'm tempted. None of us are saints here, and we all get tempted. But I'm not going to I'm not going to stop lying until the Lord heals my heart. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. That's what the Lord said. What you need is a new heart. The reason you're lying so much is because your heart is sick. You're broken. You think you're on your own. You're isolated. You got to get ahead. Your neighbor's your competition instead of your brother. Everything's out there to manipulate or for you to have and possess. Jesus said, until I heal your heart, you're not going to have the freedom and the security and the confidence to say, I know where my life is headed. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna live the life God's called me to live.
Don't you think we run away from the truth? We just run away, and we can't run
absolutely.
away. No matter where we run, I think it's Psalm 139. No matter where, if I go east or west, north or south, you're always there, Lord. He's there all the time. We can't run away from the truth.
And failing to live in the truth is kind of like when you're water skiing, you haven't got out of the water yet. You're just being dragged through the water. I mean, the goal is to get out of the water and begin to ski. And the same thing is live in the truth, and then we can actually begin to be just, which is to start not just stop lying, it's to start setting things right. We actually, the world's broken and needs us to live rightly.
Yeah. And you know what? The Lord calls us to it, brother, so we can be free.
Yes.
You know, I mean, there's a greater degree of freedom in my life than there was 15, 20 years ago, precisely because I've been surrendering to the Lord. You guys know too. I'm not finished. I got a ways to go. But believing the Lord on this, He has the power to make us different kinds of people. And the freedom He can give us is exactly what we really want, what our hearts really want.
And what's He say? The truth will what?
Set you free. That's
And
a
He
fact.
talked to all of us. You know, He's telling all of us. And we know that. I just want to help the people out there to know this. The truth will set you free. Even though you might be caught up in Charlotte's web in your life and everything doesn't seem, just be truth. Be truthful.
Go to Him who is the truth, cling to Him, receive the Spirit of truth, and He'll lead us wherever we need to go.
Each of these guys gets their last word on justice, that truth setting us free. Next, from the end zone, here on Crossing the Goal. Here in the end zone on Crossing the Goal, we have time for one last thought from each of our team members. Peter?
Brothers, just want to say that, remember that the road to living justice begins with mercy, God's mercy. If you're trapped in lies, if you're trapped in whatever separates you from living that life the Lord's calling you to, trust first in the mercy of God. Turn your heart to Him, and He'll set you on the right path.
Great words, Peter. I want to encourage you as well. The scriptures tell us that the just man sins 7 times a day. We're not talking about become perfect overnight here. We need to recognize that this is incremental progress in grace. God's a father, and just as our earthly fathers raise us up over time to become men, God wants to work with you day in and day out now to make incremental progress on the way to perfection so that one day He'll meet you face to face and say, well done.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Men, out there in the world, don't you hear a lot of times that man is a man of integrity, a man honest, a man that's upright? Well, it all comes down to choices we make in life. And we know what the right thing to do is. And remember this, I'm going to close with this. Do right, even when it seems right to do wrong.
Thanks, Danny, a one-time special teams coach for Dub Airs. Curtis Martin, Peter Herbeck, our Crossing the Goal team. We'll see you next time on Crossing the Goal. Until then, dare to be great, men. We're made for it.